And Prime Minister Mark Carney said Canadians should be ready for some challenges and sacrifices in a speech outlining some of his government's priorities for the upcoming federal budget. Carney claimed that his government is preparing to build a stronger economy against the backdrop of a more dynamic, a more competitive, a more hostile world.
Our government has the fiscal capacity to act decisively, and we must draw on these strengths now. And this is what the upcoming budget will be about: building, taking control, and winning. We will make generational investments with a plan to protect our communities, our borders, our way of life. We will build a stronger economy where everyone has a chance to get ahead. And we will empower Canadians with new opportunities, better careers, and a lower cost of living. And at the core of our strategy will be to catalyze unprecedented investments in Canada over the next 5 years. That's what's going to come above and beyond these projects. And Budget 2025 will introduce our climate competitiveness strategy. With a focus on results over objectives, on investments over prohibition, we will build sustainably. Our strategy will recognize that in today's global economy, we have to build sustainably. It's not just a moral duty, it's also an economic imperative. It is a moral duty, but it's an economic imperative. Now, above all, we will build Canadian. The new security threats the world is bringing to our shores means we're making the biggest investments in our military in generations. And to build on this momentum, I'm going to put it in context. Our goal for Canada is to double our non-US exports over the course of the next decade, generating more than $300 billion more in trade, and that's new orders for Canadian resources, technologies, and expertise. But as well, in the budget, we will unlock new apprenticeships, new skills training programs, and a new talent strategy for the next generation of scientists and innovators who will build our country. The upcoming budget will balance the operating deficit in 3 years by reducing wasteful government spending and doing more with less. So the fact is that federal spending has been growing over the course of the last decade by more than 7% year over year. We've been spending faster than our economy was growing. So we have to change that, and our government is changing that.
I'm now joined by our contributor, David Clement, to break down the Prime Minister's budget outline. Now, David, the Prime Minister spoke about how Canada has the fiscal capacity to be bold. What do you make of that?
Well, I think we need to be bold, but I don't think we have the fiscal capacity to be bold in the sense of more spending and higher deficits. And just to put it into historical context, the deficit has grown from 0.6% of GDP in 2016 to 1.3%, so blowing past historical averages. The accumulated debt back in 2016 was 708 billion. We're now closer to 1.3 billion. So yes, we have to be bold because we have to get our economic house in order. That's primarily a question of revenue and growth, not a question about more spending. And the problem here is that you hear unprecedented times. We're in unprecedented times, kind of recycled over and over. But there is a limit to how many times you can say we're in unprecedented times to justify even higher deficits.
Now, you mentioned unprecedented times, but could it not be argued that we are actually in those unprecedented times?
And this is the thing. This is almost like the boy who cried wolf. So the pandemic was unprecedented times. It was a 100-year pandemic. World War II, unprecedented times. But you only get to run that experiment so many times before the bills start to come due. And you're supposed to be lining your pockets in good times to prepare you for those unprecedented times. We haven't done that as a country, and we have some hard fiscal realities now to face because, again, you can't have this happen twice in 20 years, let alone twice in a span of 6 or 7 years.
Now, the Prime Minister also highlighted military spending, but you've argued that some of that might not be accounted for in the budget. Could you walk us through what's missing here?
Yeah, so the PBO, when they did their initial forecast, missed a good chunk of the military spending commitments. So it's still unclear whether or not that is actually going to be in the budget. But it is fair to say, and the CD Howe Institute has pointed this out, that we're looking at, I mean, maybe $45 billion worth of spending that is just kind of unaccounted for. And so the answer is we're either not going to do it and miss our commitment, or we are and we haven't been as forthcoming with Canadians yet in terms of how we're actually going to do it and whether or not any of that spending is going to be this year. For those who want us to spend more on our military, and there's certainly a good argument for that, punting it down the road into the next budget probably isn't going to make those people particularly happy. But at the same time, it is a huge amount of money when we're possibly looking at a budget deficit north of $90 billion, more than any other budget deficit in Canadian history, with the exception of the pandemic.
And when the prime minister says that Ottawa will balance the operating budget in 3 years, what exactly does that mean?
That's a good question. It's almost like a sleight of hand. Would be a lot like a business saying, well, in 3 years, we'll cover our payroll, but we really don't have a plan to cover all of our other expenses like rent or machinery or anything like that. And so I don't find this language from the prime minister particularly useful because at the end of the day, whether we call things investments or not, right? He's been both on the campaign trail and now as prime minister talked about capital investments. Well, that sounds great, and maybe they are worthwhile projects, and they very well could be. But at the end of the day, that's government spending, and it is disingenuous to label it as an investment as if it doesn't have an immediate cost right now. And so do I think it's good enough that we're essentially committing to meet payroll in 3 years? Probably not. But what's more concerning there is the fact that the prime minister can say that as if it's a big leap in terms of fiscal progress, but we've yet to see any concrete solutions or ideas in terms of actually getting closer to paying the total number or having a total balanced budget that includes all the other things that government is spending money on.
Now, David, we have just under a minute, but there have been rumors circulating about the budget possibly not passing. What's the latest out of Ottawa?
I think it will pass. There are lots of rumors. There are rumors of conservatives crossing the floor. There are rumors that the NDP wouldn't support isn't going to support the budget. At the end of the day, I think this will ultimately come down to the NDP. They are not in a position for an election anytime soon. They have to focus on rebuilding. They just cannot afford to potentially lose all of their seats in another election. But it may not be disadvantageous for the Carney government to try their hand at another election given where they are in the polls. But I do think it's highly unlikely given the circumstances.
Well, David, as always, we appreciate the time.
Thank you.